Bitcoin itself was sort of born out of the last financial crisis. It was, it has a philosophy behind it, et cetera, which I think everyone's familiar with. But fundamentally, though, this technology kind of rose out of the ashes of the last financial crisis. And we don't need to get into all the details of Bitcoin and its role, but I think the idea that there's a fundamental technology and economic innovation, one that in this case actually has been very grassroots. It's sort of being built out of the image of the internet. It's being built out by a lot of smart technologists, computer scientists, economists, others, and versus I think historically a lot of the economic system innovation was very top down, planned as it were. But we're now in another global economic situation, unpredictable, as we've just discussed exactly how that plays out, and the role of currencies, the role of global currencies, reserve currencies, how nations around the world manage their own fiscal policies in the face of some of the stresses that are now happening. It kind of creates this environment where it's possible to start imagining new possibilities in the international monetary system around digital currency. But maybe before we go deep into any given theme, maybe just I'd love to have you share your high-level perspective on digital currency, on these kind of public networks, blockchain networks, and the use of digital currency in that context.
I've got a view which I think probably puts me intermediate between the Bitcoin evangelists and the high traditionalists who see no reason for it. Seems to me that the case for crypto historically rests on three pillars, of which I think one has a quite substantial chance of being valid and important and sufficient to support a very big table. And I don't particularly believe the other two. One case is a case that governments are going to debauch all the traditional currencies, that the pressures of rising debt, dealing with crises, standing behind banking systems, all of that is going to lead to hyperinflation, and then people aren't going to want to be putting their money in currencies. They're going to be wanting to be putting their money in gold, but there are a variety of problems with gold. And so internet exchangeable gold is going to, in some proper form, is going to become immensely valuable. That's possible. I don't read existing currencies as being on their way to being debauched. Right. Seems to me that while certain monetary aggregates as measured have risen, there are good technical ways to understand that. And you look ahead at market expectations from index bonds, people think that the real problem is that central banks in Japan, Europe, and the United States won't be able to meet their inflation targets of 2%, won't be able to get inflation up to 2% even over the next generation. So that might be a wrong bet, but I think the odds that traditional currencies are going to become so inflationary, and it's going to be so difficult when they become inflationary to earn an interest rate on them, that people are going to be seeking some separate, really scarce, hard asset. I just don't think that's going to drive a major crypto industry. Second thing I think is that I don't think crypto is going to be accepted as some kind of libertarian paradise. I know that there are people who believe that financial privacy in terms of the ability to transfer money is a fundamental human right, and that without it, there will be substantial infringements on freedom. And I understand those arguments, but I guess my attitude is more captured by the fact that the 500 euro note is always referred to as the bin Laden. Mm-hmm. And that suggests something about what, when you have super privacy, mm-hmm. tends to be a lot the result. So I don't think governments will permit tax evaders, money launderers, privacy cravers, and zealots to use this technology to advance their privacy relative to what they have now. I think, if anything, around concerns about regulation, corruption, tax evasion, right, governments will want less financial privacy over time, and they will succeed in getting what they want. I think the case for all of this innovation will lie in the fact that there's a ridiculous degree of friction in today's world around doing quite complex things. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the 8% that it can cost me to send money to 8% in 2 days, that it can cost me to send money to my kid when my kid is in a study abroad program, whether it's the 2.5+% that it costs me every time I use a Visa card in a department store, whether it is the $3 I have to pay for the routine act of getting cash out. And I could go on with examples of this kind. I think the friction both in terms of monetary payment and friction in terms of effort that's involved in exchange is excessive.
Yeah.
And I think that the friction isn't just coming from the greed of the middle people, although there is greed of the middle people. It's coming from the various difficulties and challenges associated with mutual trust. As you know better than I, the computer science theory on which a lot of this is based was referred to as the Byzantine generals problem. And how do you get a group of people who don't trust each other to nonetheless be able to do business together? And innovation in institutional form that permits interaction where it otherwise wasn't possible. Right. That's what the common law corporation was. That's what the contract was. And I think the kind of innovation that's involved in coming out of the crypto community is very fundamental. And we tend to associate the idea of innovation with new machines and new medicines, but it's also new ways of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, this is like social and institutional.
Social, right. And so I think it's a very, very important kind of innovation. But my own view is that that's where the future lies. And I think it could be a very large and substantial future. But I'm not going to go with the arguments about all the other currencies are going to be debauched, right, or the arguments about the centrality of privacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think our focus, as you know, is we built this standard U.S. dollar coin, USDC. It's how do you take the leading reserve currency and make it available as a digital currency and get those trustless transactions, the speed of the internet, the cost efficiency, and the programmability, the composability, all these things you can do with it. I think that's very, very exciting. And we're seeing that grow very fast. And it's leading into a number of interesting questions, which do relate to the question of how governments are going to respond. And I would say there's sort of two areas to talk through. I think, one is really the in some ways the threat that things like stablecoins might pose to governments around the world, where effectively you have digital currencies that can be accessed with any digital wallet on any smartphone by anyone anywhere. And as I like to say, people in pick your Latin American country or maybe a South Asian country or what have you, can vote with their smartphones. And in the same way that they said, hey, I want to go over the top the internet and have a free communications platform like WhatsApp, and I don't care about my local telephone company or my government regulated communication system. I'm just going to use the internet. And these kinds of digital currency innovations allow people to kind of have an economic system that goes over the top of the internet, and then people can choose to participate in that. And will governments allow that? Will they have a choice? It's a very interesting question. And then the other is sort of ultimately the relationship to central banks. But I want to maybe start with the first and hear your thoughts on, this can happen very fast. You talk about, Libra and the rising growth of global stablecoins. The G20 and FSB is now coming up with policies on this to say, hey, what are the rules of the road for these? But very quickly, we could have people everywhere sort of choosing which currency system they want to participate in a lot more easily than they can today.
I think it's a very hard thing to know. The metric system really is better than the English system. It's simpler. Any calculation is easier. It's internally coherent between weights and volumes. It's just better. But the inertia of the network turns out to cause things to carry on for a very long time. And I don't think we know how much inertia surrounds private behavior around a national currency. There is a phenomenon that, has been observed at various junctures in Argentina, has been observed at various other junctures of dollarization. When a national currency is sufficiently chaotic, incoherent, and uncertain, people start holding $100 bills and start holding $50 bills, and there are U.S. banks that are happy to ship them there, and people start quoting prices in dollars because who knows what a price in pesos will mean, and economies become gradually dollarized, and then the dollar is their de facto currency. The fact that you don't have to hold paper wads, and you can do it with your cell phone and all of that,
which is
probably
everyone is very comfortable with that in these places, right? They
probably operates in the direction of reducing the threshold of getting out of the local currency system.
Right.
On the other hand, when people were getting into dollars, it was like the dollar with George Washington and 250 years of U.S. tradition and all that. And it's not that there haven't been incidents in the cryptocurrency community such as to cause alarm. So I think it's going to be a source of pressure, and there may be economies where there's a conversion. I suspect the general law about technology that things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen faster than you thought they could. I suspect that's going to be operative here.